Great, thank you so much. Welcome back from lunch. I hope you all were able to take a breather, get up, walk around. I know this conference is hybrid, so we have some folks, in the Zoom room here with us, and I don't know how the in-person is set up, but we'll do my best to accommodate. Um, yeah, so welcome. I know we have a lot to kind of present today, and we probably won't get through all of it just because time is limited, and that's okay. But I do hope that you all enjoy this session, and thanks for joining us. So I wanted to actually start to just get a sense of who's in the room. Just want to hear and just know who else is here. So if you could share in the chat where you're zooming in from, or where kind of, if you traveled to the conference, where your place of work is. You can do that in any way, whether by city or state or the land recognition and acknowledgement, just to get a sense of who's with us today. So please share in the chat, and let's see where everyone's calling in from or joining us from. Some Utah, I see Oregon. Awesome. Yay, thank you so much. And like Grace, I'm also coming and joining you all today from Los Angeles, California, Chumash, Tongva, and Quicheland. So it's great to have you all here on all these different time zones. So thanks for joining us. And thank you also for those who included your role and kind of what, organization. If you want to add that as well, please go ahead and do so. And I'm going to go ahead and get started. So this is actually the first time our organization CPAF. So I'm here on behalf of CPAF. Grace is here on behalf of POICC. We'll get into the details of that in a little bit. But this is the first time CPAF has joined this National Pacific Islander Violence Prevention Conference, and super exciting to be here, super honored to be here. So thank you for joining us and for being here with us today. My name is Anna Lee. I use she, her pronouns, and I am working for CPAF, Center for the Pacific Asian Family, which is a dual domestic violence and sexual assault agency. And we serve the Asian and Pacific Islander community here in Los Angeles County. I work as the prevention program manager at this agency. And so super excited. We're going to get into what we have for you all today in just a little bit. We have a recorded performance, and we have a presentation on this pilot prevention curriculum that we used in our communities. And I'm really curious to see how that resonates with you all, what your opinions are on it. So really want to try to squeeze in a breakout room discussion in the end. We'll probably have small breakout rooms, about 4 people each, just to kind of process, because we're going to go through a lot of information. And a part of that, and during the presentation, I'm going to have Grace join us as our panelist, as our guest speaker, to speak about her experience in this project. So really looking forward to that. I may have to continuously stop and share. We'll see how this goes. So I'm not going to read all of this, just really quickly, a bit about our agency, Center for the Pacific Asian Family, CPAF, so we go for CPAF for short. What I want to highlight here is really our vision. Our vision is of an Asian and Pacific Islander community that embraces healthy relationships, and really highlighting that working in partnership with other communities to eradicate all forms of violence. Our agency, CPAF, is not specific to one ethnic group. But we are serving the Pan-Asian and Pacific Islander community. So we definitely rely on our community partners who serve ethnic-specific communities like Grace here, KYCC with the Korean community. And likely those organizations have closer relationships and a breadth of knowledge for specific communities more than we do. So we definitely rely on that partnership, definitely want to build those bridges and seeing how we can support. So definitely want to recognize the necessity of that partnership to doing this work, and that we're not alone. And I'm really looking forward to learning from you all today as well. A little bit about what our agency does, but again, I'm not going to read the whole thing. I think the main thing I want to point out is that our agency has shelter programs. So we have emergency shelter and 2 transitional shelters for domestic violence and sexual assault survivors. And then we have community-facing programs, so services that we provide outside of the shelter, as well as community engagement, outreach, and prevention falls under that as well, which I'm here representing. And so before I begin and we get into the performance and all of that, I wanted to give some context about what I just said and wanted to give some transparency about that too. You will quickly notice that, what we share today, whether through performance or through the research and the project that we're here to share about, a lot of the voices represented and the stories represented there are from East Asian, Southeast Asian, and South Asian communities. So why our agency was really interested in presenting at this conference was to acknowledge and address the gap in our services currently in Los Angeles County to the Pacific Islander community. And so we'd really like to share with you again the prevention project that we completed last year. And we're really hoping to ask for your reflection and feedback on whether you are doing similar prevention programs, if that looks similar, what aspects of this project maybe resonates with you, what's very different, respective to your respective Pacific Islander communities. And I hope that, yeah, we definitely want to get some time for those breakout rooms and then sharing back out at the end of the session. So I thank you in advance for your participation and totally respect any way that you are able to engage today. Okay, let me share again. And we'll start with this performance and a little bit background on what it is. So it's called 626, and 626 is an area code in Los Angeles County of one of the regions. And so we're going to begin with a couple poetry pieces performed by 4 local high school students. There'll be 2 poems. The first poem is one that the youth selected and it was written by someone else. And the second is a poem that the youth wrote and created in response to that first poem. So it's kind of a 2-part thing. So as you see on this slide, a poetry response that's describing this performance, it details the personal experiences with anti-Asian racism from the perspective of Asian American high school youth who have grown up in the majority Asian community of the 626. 626 is heavily populated with Chinese speaking population and Vietnamese speaking population, and the Latinx population as well, just to give you a little background. And about the poets themselves, they are part of a local Mark Keppel High School poetry team. They compete, and it's a way for them to really engage and have an outlet, creative outlet for their experiences. And you can see more of their work in their Instagram there. I do want to give a heads up, just a content warning, as you can see that it's going to be talking about anti-Asian sentiment, etc. And so that racist sentiment can be very triggering. So please do what you need to do to ensure your own emotional safety, and please, acknowledge your own feelings in a way that's healthy for you. The purpose of sharing this is to really hear from youth's experience, have some youth voice in this. And I hope we can really honor their passion and creativity and the way of storytelling that has been meaningful for them. So the chat is again open for engagement, for you to cheer on, for you to affirm, for you to, nod your head or however you want to engage in that, just to kind of see how you all are responding and reacting with this. If you like, it's totally voluntary. And also use react buttons, emojis, things in the chat as well. So the youth are not present here with us today, but they know that we're sharing this, and I'll be happy to share back with them just how this is taken.
Hi, I'm Jelena Hendrickson.
I'm Catherine Ping.
I'm Ella Chan.
I'm Justine Lee.
And this is our classic poem, Pomegranate Means Grenade,
by Jamal May.
The heart trembles like a herd of horses.
John Tay McCroy, age 11.
Hold a pomegranate in your palm.
Imagine ways to split it.
Think of the breaking skin as shrapnel.
Remember, Granada means pomegranate.
And Granada means grenade.
Because grenade takes its name from the fruit.
Identify war by what it takes away from feckin' orchards.
John Tay.
There will always be one like you.
A child who gets the picked over box with mostly black crayons.
One who wonders what beautiful has to do with beauty.
As he darkens a sun in the corner of every page.
Constructs a house from ashen lines.
Sketches stick figures lying face down.
I know how often red is the only color left to reach for.
I fear for you.
You are riding a stampede into my chest.
The same anxiety that shudders me when I push past Marines in high school hallways.
Moments after video footage of young men dropping from helicopters in night vision goggles.
I want you to see in the dark without covering your face.
And carry verse as countermeasure to recruitment videos.
And remember,
The cranes buried inside the poems painted on banners that hung in Tiananmen Square.
remember,
Because Huang Xiang was exiled for these.
remember,
Because the poet Huang Shan was exiled for this.
The calligraphy of revolt.
Always know that you will stand nameless in front of a tank.
always know you will not stand alone.
But there will always be those who would rather see you pull a pin from a grenade.
Then pull a pen from your backpack.
John Tay.
They are afraid.
And our response poem is 626.
More Asians live in the San Gabriel Valley than in 42 other states.
Walking into the 99 Ranch Market on a Sunday morning is like walking into a herd of horses.
My mom heaves bags of rice from the shelves, clicking her tongue at prices while I reach for lemon tea.
Grab wrinkled Chinese sausage and dried black mushrooms.
And behind the aisles, there are cluttered fish tanks and the thick smell of a soak's burnt oil when he tucks the catfish between tinfoil and paper.
We feel safe. 626.
This area code has become our bomb shelter.
Where I speak freely at home, but never outside,
Where people are racist but not as racist.
because power in numbers means something.
626.
This is where we can think that we're safe, or as safe as we can be.
Because racism doesn't have a geography.
Even if I wanted to, even if I wished being in the 626 was enough to protect me.
Everyone says COVID is why we're being killed, but really it's racism doing the work.
Kung flu is just an excuse.
Just another pin being pulled from a grenade that was going to explode anyway. The grenades are always,
Have always.
been exploding.
The first Chinese people to arrive in the United States were from Taisan, where my family is from.
So that means when the first Chinese man was killed,
He must have cried out in our language.
Taisanese is a dying dialect now.
But I heard it yesterday.
From a video of Mama as she stood with a black eye.
Her voice loud but lost, watching the man who had hit her getting escorted on a stretcher.
She had hit him back.
There's a stampede in my chest from seeing static footage of men attacking women,
Who looked like my grandmother. We bonded over our obsession with Lo Mai Fan.
hovering over the large pot of white rice.
Weaving in the mushrooms.
Chinese sausage.
And endless stories about her village.
There,
I would feel connected to our heritage.
Here,
She is denied America.
I'm sorry, I can't understand your accent. You're gonna have to be clearer.
the same way my grandma has been treated, criticized for fixing smokers' teeth to support her family.
The same way 6 Asian women were murdered in Asian-owned businesses.
yet the headlines refuse to state motive.
The sheriff's deputy calls it
A bad day.
skirt around what we already know by the sinking pits in our stomachs.
626.
This is the best we can do.
And so we'll stay.
We deserve safety.
We deserve the 99 Ranch.
It's cradling shells.
Where we can buy our lemon tea and black mushrooms.
Where a pomegranate is not a grenade.
It's just on sale for $1.99.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, I know when I first watched this, it was just so many different pieces, and I was like, wow, it's really powerful. So, just to take a breath, take whatever you need. Again, just acknowledging your feelings. Thank you so much for the reaction buttons and for the comments. I'll definitely pass that along to them. Yeah, powerful stuff. Just breathing, whatever emotions came up for you in any way, right? It doesn't have to be an agreement. It could be a disagreement. Just whatever those feelings are, they're valid. And thank you so much for, sharing that with us. yeah, and I also just want to acknowledge kind of witnessing that this is an example of how youth are coming together to make sense of, racism and oppression and violence, right? And we know that violence has so many intersections, right? So that's something really powerful, wanted to share with you all here today. And you'll see how that connects, of course, to our presentation. Let me get the slide back up. I'm going to read the chat a little bit. Yeah, the strength in their voices. Yes, thank you so much. Yes, yeah, thanks for saying that, Bella. And youth and adults, we can definitely work in partnership around that. And I think that's what we're going to kind of get into today. So thank you so much for your comments. Really appreciate it. So this is a way youth are coming together to make sense of this, right? And again, we know that all violence intersects at some point, whether it's gender-based violence, domestic violence, racism, et cetera. And so how do people process this? How do people talk about it, communicate, or bridge, or have conversations and open dialogue about it? And more importantly, how can we also support families to process challenging issues in the home, right? Or just in the spaces that we're sharing with youth. And so that's going to lead us into our presentation for the day. Confronting gender-based violence from the intersections. And the intersections that we're going to be looking at is between youth and parents, and especially those cultural dynamics, right, that we see for youth that were born and raised in America, perhaps, for parents who were not, or even for those who many generations here, but the cultural dynamics of being here, it's very, complicated and nuanced. And so what the project that we're going to present on today was a domestic violence prevention project. And I'll be presenting that today. Grace will also be alongside me presenting about it today. And this project looks at confronting domestic violence from the intersections of race, ethnicity, culture, and an intergenerational context between youth and their parents. I think mostly when people think about prevention programs, we think about programs for youth, maybe working with high schoolers or junior high, middle school, elementary, maybe even ages 0 to 5 and their parents. But a crucial piece of prevention is creating some kind of intergenerational program. And that's not something that we see as often, I think, here, at least in Los Angeles. If you have, that's awesome, please do share that. And it becomes really complex, right? It becomes really challenging, especially when we're working with Asian and Pacific Islander families and just families of, different cultures and such rich cultures and diversity, and bringing that into this country and trying to raise children here, right? And so that's highlighted in our project today. Okay, so our project had two main parts to it. The first part was a community needs assessment, and the second part was the actual implementation of an intergenerational prevention program and the development of that. So before I get into this, I will be putting a link in the chat. There you go. So please, throughout our presentation, please still try to engage, and you can engage by asking questions. I know we won't be able to answer them right away or even today, but I hope to collect them all here through this link so that we'll be able to respond in some way or another, maybe get in touch somehow afterwards. I'll also leave my contact information at the end of the presentation if you want to reach out to me directly. So please do, just for the sake of time and access, please do leave questions and curiosities, things that come up during this presentation. Okay, going back. Okay, so the objective of this project was to explore and execute a culturally and linguistically appropriate community assessment process that explores 2-generation or intergenerational prevention solutions. So that's the main part of it. I won't read the rest. And so it came in this 2 parts, right? Again, this first community needs assessment, and then the development and implementation of a curriculum to address that. And it's specifically addressing in these 5 communities here. These 5 communities were the ones that a community needs assessment was done in, and then that we responded to and worked with partner agencies who work with those ethnic specific communities to implement and see and evaluate, how did that go? So it's very much a pilot project. And if you're wondering about the funding, another agency here in Los Angeles applied for a Blue Shield Foundation of California grant. and asked us, CPAF, to be a subcontractor on that grant, along with 5 other agencies, including Grace's agency, KYCC, to work with these ethnic specific communities. So CPAF's role was to lead the part 2 of this project, which was the implementation, training all 5 agencies on a certain curriculum framework for them to then implement with their parent and youth in their communities. There was another subcontractor on this grant who led this part, the community needs assessment part, and they were a research and evaluation, portion of this. So definitely this was funded fully and supported, and it gave us a great opportunity to be really, in depth with this project and get a lot of learning and try things and see if it works and addresses domestic violence from a prevention standpoint. Okay. These are some numbers about the focus groups and the community needs assessment we did, but I won't get into that. And instead I'll go straight to the findings. So what was discovered? What did people learn from this? What were some main highlights? And I won't go through all of them, but I'll just highlight 3 because I think there are 3 that are really distinct and highlighted. And, as Grace will share in her experience, and I will share later on as well, some themes that came up and it really informed the curriculum that we put together. I can share, this is a full report, and I can share that link out as well. But the findings of this study recommended strategies. So after doing focus groups with each of those communities, a report was made from those findings, and from those findings recommended what prevention strategies, what are some things we can do to address this, to change norms within each community. One was focused around open communication. So this one right here, norms around parental modeling versus direct communication. So open discussion about domestic violence matters. It's not typical, right? It's not maybe supported in communities that we're familiar with. And I'm sure you all can relate to that and understand, right? It's a very hush-hush, don't talk about it. It's personal, private business, etc. And so there's a level of some kind of need, right, for open communication to exist and to be able to happen for youth.
So yeah, we're like short on time, so I'm going to try to just stick to my talking points. So we were honored and privileged to be able to partner with CPAF in this work. We participated in both the first half, which was the needs assessment. We facilitated some youth focus groups to contribute to the report, which you all should definitely read. And then we participated in the second half, which was actually providing both parent and youth curriculum. So 2 other staff at our agency participated in the parent, receiving the training and then delivering the curriculum. And then myself and another staff participated in the youth training and facilitating the youth curriculum. The training was extensive, so we did meet, CPAF was like our technical expert. So we met with them weekly, like 2 to 3 hours for a while. First, I don't remember, Anna, maybe like 8 weeks, 8 to 10, 12 weeks. So we like walked through each week of what, each lesson plan for that week. And while we were delivering and facilitating the actual model, we would then be debriefing. So we did this in partnership with other API ethnic groups that were, like there was a group delivering the same exact curriculum to Cambodian youth and to South Asian youth and to Chinese youth. So it was really great and fascinating to be, we're all doing this, but tweaking it, understanding that we're each experts in our own communities. For me, one big thing was, so when we got to the topic of gender, we talked about gender not being binary. We talked about, we use this, I'm sure you've seen the illustration of the gender unicorn. And I was concerned with how Korean youth might respond to that. And the reason for that is that in the Korean community, Christianity is like a huge part of, social aspects, but also values and beliefs. So I didn't know, I was worried that the youth who participated in our groups would be Christian, raised in the church, and would have some opposition to what we were presenting to them, or would have discomfort with what we were presenting to them. I was wrong in my assumption. Once it came time to deliver our curriculum, many of the youth, they are Christian, they do go to church, they were raised in the church, but they were very open, and some of them were very, very well versed in some of the things that we were teaching them. We thought like, oh, we're introducing new concepts to them, but many of them were really already well informed in a lot of the topics that we were talking about. So I had some fear of like how some of these things might be received, but I was wrong. They were very open, if not already well informed. Some things that came up, like the biggest themes that came up in our group were really around gender. Like we talked about culture, there was like a whole week around gender. We moved on to power and privilege, but it kept going back to gender, which was really interesting and fascinating. I mean, Korean culturally, it's definitely like a male dominant culture. There's hierarchies, right, of who has power and how people are treated. As youth, it was a lot of like, well, my brother's treated like this and I'm treated like this, or my dad does this and my mom does this. So those things that they've observed and seen, whatever we were talking about, we kind of always went back to gender. And it was a lot of like, it's not fair. It's like, it's hard to be a girl. Boys are treated differently, and it's not fair. It's not right. A lot of that theme, as well as like, my parents don't understand me. I would never be able to have these conversations openly with my parents. The other pieces were, it's interesting when you talk about prevention work. I feel like it's like indirect prevention. We're not teaching the cycle of violence. We're not really teaching domestic violence or intimate partner violence like directly, right? Which you may think like that's what DV prevention might look like with youth. So I feel like our approach was a little bit, it's more indirect, and I think what we were trying to accomplish was, one, like empower the youth to have really strong identities and a strong sense of self, so that they wouldn't be vulnerable to unhealthy relationships. I think that was a large piece of it. The other thing is empowering them to speak up when they do see power imbalances, understanding that, even though they're young, like they themselves do have some power and privilege, and they are capable of speaking up and speaking out when they do see power imbalances and injustice. In terms of like dating, consent, there was really only 1 week where we talked about relationships. And, you think talking to youth, they'd be really excited about talking about relationships, but they really didn't have a whole lot to say. We asked about dating, how you meet people, and yeah, it's not a topic that we really went back to a lot. Again, it was more parent-child dynamic, family dynamic, gender imbalances, and that was what they would get a little bit more excited about talking about. So yeah, and then the other thing that we were always trying to balance was like, we wanted to be careful not to give them the messaging that like Korean cultural values are wrong and American Western cultural values are correct, right? So we were always trying to strike that balance to still honor your culture, honor, the values that you're raised with, but also, how to balance, as children of immigrants, it's like they have this duality of being raised in the States, but being raised by parents who came from Korea. So striking that balance that, you can honor like both sides of yourself, and we're not saying like one is better than the other. So that was something that we all were always mindful of and careful around. That is it for me, Anna. We have like 2 minutes left.
I know, and it's true, we can't do breakout rooms, but I still have like a form or like some questions, another Mentimeter, if folks want to share. I do want to share the parenting part of it, because this is intergenerational, so I think that's a really important part. Let me pull that up. Okay. And thank you all so much for your patience as we go through this as well. So this is the parenting framework. And similarly, we create space for parents to reflect about their own values and values they wish their children to have, right? And then in module 2, you see like a deep reflection on their own childhood and how they were raised, and then how they were taught these values and how that impacts their parenting today. And I'll say that was a big takeaway from a lot of the parents that worked with the group. CPAF didn't facilitate with parents directly, but this was the feedback that we got from those who did, from the 5 agencies who did work with the parents. And so, yeah, we hope through this, like the participants make connections and learn why they react to their children now the way they do by thinking about how they were raised growing up. In module 3, we talk about brain development in a young person and how that can explain why their children is acting a certain way. And that was a lot of light bulbs, and that was another big module highlight. So the parents, we heard a lot of positive feedback on modules 2, 3, and 4, that those were the ones that really stuck with them. And when we learn about the brain, we also learn about our stress responses and what triggers us. We kind of identify that, again, connecting it to our childhood, and how we manage our stress and what happens to our brain, you know, when there's stress happening. So that kind of science part of it, some folks were really into, and it helped explain things. It helped there be a reason. So I think that was comforting as well, and identifying those triggers. Module 4 is super important, and it's about anger and about really honoring anger and seeing anger as an emotion that can really inform, you know, what is going on with us, and not something to be shameful of or to look down on, but rather thinking about how can we express that in a way, or how can we use anger to take pause. That was the big takeaway for a lot of parents, was when they learned about taking pause first, just take a moment and not react so quickly, and just kind of like take a breath. That was really resonating with a lot of the parents across all 5 communities. Module 5, we talk about supportive guidance. So what that means is a lot of times we use principles of parenting with nonviolence through all of this. And a lot of times when people hear nonviolence, they think, you know, there's no violence happening, there's nothing. So that means there's no disciplining your children, there's no way to get them to listen, you know. So then it just means you let your child do whatever you want, but it's not that at all. Right, there are definitely limits. You know, there's concerns for children's safety, for their health, their well-being. That's why, you know, there are rules. That's why there are limits. And it's how do we frame that, or how do we model that or communicate that with children in a way that still keeps them connected with each other instead of being fearful of their parents, or instead of causing disconnect. So that's definitely a harder practice because it's so new to all of us. It's so different than what we were raised with. And so that's why the module 6 is really focused on a lot of practice. It is 12:50. That was kind of the framework. And I was going to talk about more about the parents' feedback, but yeah, if you all want contact info really quickly, I can put in the chat. Feel free to email me with any questions, happy to. And I would love you to reach out, because again, we didn't get to the breakout rooms, and that was, we really want to learn more and hear from Pacific Islander communities and how that resonated and what you know about those communities and this kind of prevention project. Would that be something you would implement? What would be the challenges? What do you already see not working? What are some similarities? So please do reach out. If you have a moment, you can also submit answers to those questions here. Yeah, just really appreciate, because we're really here to like learn and really build bridges. So thank you so much for being here in this session today, and have a great rest of the conference.